Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast. We are back. The last couple of episodes have been Computex episodes that we filmed a while back, but yeah, we've been doing a lot of testing around here, so there's been plenty to talk about. We're going to get into some of the preparation and thoughts about Zen 5 coming up. We've got some more thoughts on FSR 3.1 testing that we've been doing recently. Obviously, there's been more developments in the Intel power spec situation, so if you've been following that through our videos or through our podcast episodes, many more thoughts on that. And yeah, just updates from our general life as well. Lots of projects in the works from both of us to talk about. So let's get straight into it. Well, Steve, it's been a while since we've done a podcast. We recorded a bunch of them at Computex and then took a break for a little while to get some content out back here in Australia. And now we're back for more podcasting. Lots of content's been happening. What's been happening on your end?
I've been doing heaps of different things. That's kind of the reason why we missed last week, because busy with work and projects and stuff like that. So yeah, flat out, we've decided, Baylor and I, that we're going to extend the studio, but not to be more studio. We're building a gym and sort of like a kitchenette area and stuff like that. So that'll be nice.
Nice.
Free up a bit of space around this podcast area as well. So I might actually be able to set up like a proper podcast area. So we'll see how that goes. But that's something we've been working on a bit when we have time, or I have been.
So you're thinking like extending, you mean actually like knocking a wall out and making it longer, or just an additional room?
Just an additional room. You know how there's already that door on the back that goes sort of to nowhere? So that'll go into a 9 by 9 meter room. So quite a large room. And
Nice.
we want to put some gym equipment in there. It's probably about time I got back to that. It's been about 20 years. And Balin loves his gym stuff, so he wouldn't mind. He's got a home gym and all that as well, but it'd be kind of cool having some stuff here. So that's what we're going to do.
Cool.
Don't know when that'll be finished, but many months away from now, I imagine, because I can't do it full time, of course. So we're just sort of like how I built my shed, throw some hours at it here and there. So I estimate 4 to 5 months for it to be 100% complete, probably 3 months to where it's sort of usable. But that's weather dependent, how busy we are with work. Obviously, there's a lot of new products coming up, so I'm going to be pretty slammed for time. And that's sort of been the case anyway since we got back from Computex. Finally, did some of those content pieces that I've been saying I'll do for I don't know how long now, but got them done, happy with them. And yeah, it's all going well. What about yourself?
Yeah, so pretty similar, really. I feel like, you go to Computex, it's kind of that period just before going to Computex where you're just waiting to go to Computex.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, yeah, there's a big event coming up, got to prepare for that. And then when you're back, it's like, oh, all those things, you should probably crack on, start getting some of that stuff done. Obviously, FSR 3.1 came out like out of the blue. I knew it was coming at some point. It launched. And then obviously there's been, not that I have to do too much for like new CPU launches and stuff, but that's coming up as well. So it's kind of been this sort of nice period of, just cracking on, getting stuff done, preparing for the rest of the year, just tidying up stuff, doing everything really. And we haven't done a Q&A series for a little while as well. So, with new CPUs, we'll probably crack back into that at some point. But yeah, just getting back into the swing of things really, and not really taking any breaks and trying to create interesting content for people on the channel, which I think based on the comments, the views, the reception to our videos, people have been enjoying the stuff we've been putting out, which I think has been good. So yeah, it's been, I think, a good start to the next couple of months. But yeah, busy times coming up from the sounds of things. I mean, obviously Zen 5 is supposed to launch this month. So
yeah, well, they're doing a I don't know. I don't really know what I could say. I mean, I think it's fairly well known at this point in time that there's a tech day going on, because people who are there are posting photos and things about the tech day. So I think it's safe to say we can talk about the AMD Zen 5 tech day. Not that we have personally gone or have anything to talk about, just the fact that it's mere existence and that it's taking place, which...
Yeah, I don't know if that's happening now or at some point, but obviously they're going to have to give a whole bunch of information about the processes, which is pretty typical before launches and stuff. Like before the reviews, they like to slam people with PowerPoint presentations about how the architecture works and those sorts of things. Stuff. So yeah, all the fun stuff, depending on your definition of fun. I think testing the CPUs is probably a bit more exciting than the PowerPoints, but some people live for the architecture stuff, I guess. So all that stuff happens.
Yeah, and those tech days, while we would probably attend them. We don't attend them for any of the companies because they're usually based in the US, and it's just an absurd trip for a tech day. So NVIDIA, Intel, AMD, they all sort of get equally upset that we don't attend their special little day. Uh, probably just made it worse. But it is a bit ridiculous. Like, we'd have to, first of all, fly from Melbourne to wherever it is in the US, and that's not a short trip. Usually fly in a day or two before the tech day, attend the tech day. Don't really learn anything that we can't learn from doing remotely, I suppose. And then fly all the way back. So what would you say? We lose close
It's like
to
a
a
week
week?
usually.
Yeah, a business week.
I'd say, and usually another issue is like the amount of content that you get isn't a week's worth of content.
No.
Like the amount of like they split up the content over a number of days. So like one day you'll learn about a whole one group of things. The next day you'll learn about a different set of things, and there'll be hands-on time and those sorts of things. But usually the amount of like architecture info that you get, the time for questions with people involved with the products and stuff is only like a few hours at most. It doesn't take a few hours, but the amount of time that in terms of if it was all condensed into a reasonable amount of time, it's probably only a couple of hours. And like a lot of the hands-on stuff is not really for us. It's more for a different set of people covering the products, because we would just test the final version of the products, and the stuff that we want to test is not a whole, like at Computex when we went and saw the AMD thing, and you could play like Avatar on the new Ryzen 9000 processors, and it's like
Cool.
there's no statistic information there about how the CPU is running or the frame rate or anything. It's just like a screen playing the game, and you're like, cool. Like, it's not actually giving us anything to make a video about. And I guess we could interview people or chat about stuff, but that's always been available for us over these sort of conversations, like remote stuff or ask questions via email. Those things tend to work out pretty well. So
yeah, and it's near on impossible to have an interesting conversation anyway. Like, we'll go talk to an engineer from a company sort of off the record, but there's sort of, that's not even disclosed. It's just, we just go have a conversation with them and they tell us a heap of really interesting information. Like, we learned stuff about upcoming graphics cards, CPUs, various issues in the industry, and they just divulge all kinds of information. But when it's an official on the record, like, we're going to make a video, can we interview someone? You get very boring PR answers. If you ask them an interesting question, you get usually some sort of shutdown thing like, we're not talking about that at this point in time, or that'll be discussed at an upcoming point in time, yada, yada. So it's
especially
frustrating.
If you get especially if you get executives instead of engineers. Like, and even then, like, if you get engineers in official settings, generally there's like a PR person that's in the background going like, no,
Yeah.
you can't talk about that. So, which is always really frustrating, because like, especially if things are going out like after the launch of the processors or whatever, I would have thought that like pretty much anything should be available to be talked about. Like, there should be really no limits on, there should be no, we're not talking about that yet. But often with those things, like, you're filming them before the products come out, but they're going out after the NDA expires, so the processors are available, and they're still giving you answers like,
And
we can't talk about that yet. It's like, well, this is your launch. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Give us some info.
Yeah, because they're
What's
worried
going
that it'll
on?
just be leaked out or something, which obviously wouldn't be in your best interest if you're trying to make content around that exclusive information. But also, that the other problem with that is the fact that the information you probably have becomes redundant, because it would go out with or after the reviews, and the reviews would have that information anyway, probably, if it's some sort of exciting or discovered information. So I don't want to say a waste of time, but it's pretty damn close. It's certainly a waste of time for us, because of the amount of time we have to invest to get such little information out of it that can be just sent over the internet. And it's the same thing with Computex though, right? Like, I know NVIDIA in particular, but AMD, they're not really, they are part of the Computex thing. They do like a Computex keynote, at least AMD does, but it's not, they don't have a booth, and they're not really part of the show in that sense. But you don't need to go to Computex to cover any of the big announcements from AMD, Intel, or Nvidia, you can.
Yeah, well, I literally cover the AMD
Right.
event from over there because they gave me the info ahead of time.
That's right.
Which is very funny. But
so you
yeah,
spent all that money, you flew over there, you paid for a hotel room, you attended the thing, and there was. I remember you said like, well, we'll make the video, we'll take the source material over, and if there's anything we have to add or change the video, we'll do that there. And we went and we saw the AMD live demo, we saw the AMD briefing, we saw the AMD keynote, and you were just like, yep, well, I'll just send to that. There's nothing to add. So basically, yeah, your point is to cover AMD this year at Computex, we need not have gone to Computex.
Yeah, that's right. And I feel like it's different for all sorts of different media outlets. Like it depends what you're trying to cover and what you're trying to do. But for like product testing, where the main things that we do on the channel is evaluating the final product, like interviewing people, like most of the questions that I would have about a product is after testing it. It's not before testing it, especially as you say, if like the content goes out after the reviews come out. It's, then you're just asking questions about things that you'll find out yourself when you're testing it. But it's kind of like after testing, you might find some interesting things and you can ask some questions about like, oh, why is this perform like this? Why did you make those decisions? But you can't ask those questions beforehand because you really don't know what the final performance is going to be like. And yeah, you can get some indications from the company about the performance, but independent testing is really the way to get the most information about those sorts of things. So yeah, the tech days, it's nice to catch up with people at those events and see people from the companies, but that's not content related. And really, you have to make the call like, how much content am I going to be able to make from this? What can I do staying at home versus going? And often staying at home means making more videos that you're seeing on the channel, more investigations, more content. Whereas, yeah, if one of us has to take a week off to fly to the US, that's usually a week of no content, or maybe at best you would get a video out of it. But then, of course, the question is, could you have just made that video here from getting the information anyway? So
yeah, because for us, a tech day is not a day; it's a tech week.
That's right. Yeah, and face-to-face conversations are better than getting stuff via an email. And all that stuff's true, but it's like it's a balancing act of the priorities. We don't have a huge. If we had like 30 employees, like Linus Tech Tips or someone, sure, send someone over to the US to cover things, all good. But when we have a team of 3, it's like one person taking a week to do something. Yeah, that's a lot of time. I've got some follow-up things from some of my videos that I want to talk about. I don't know if you have any follow-ups from your videos, but yeah, just looking at feedback. Obviously, we didn't do a podcast last week, and I probably would have talked a bit about FSR 3.1 on the podcast. So now's a good time as any to chat about this. And I think one of the main bits of feedback that I got from the video was, why we chose to do performance normalized testing instead of testing just at the same quality settings. So in the video, I went and I benchmarked all of the different, versions of upscaling, DLSS, FSR, XESS, to figure out exactly, which quality setting performs where. So then for the quality settings, you can match up the same levels of performance. And some people in the comments were very upset that I did this and said it was a very stupid way of testing, which is, I guess, an opinion, with the thinking that, you should be testing upscaling from either the same quality settings, so the same named settings, or the actual render resolution, which is a little different these days with XESS renaming things. They render from a little lower resolution at the same name setting. And, I've heard all sorts of opinions on this, and I'm still very firm that you shouldn't test this way. You shouldn't test just using the quality settings. And don't know whether you have too many thoughts on this.
Well,
but
the quality settings, it's pretty obvious, right? Like that's just, you can name anything. Like that's,
yeah, exactly.
It's the same frustrating thing with GPUs, right? Like they'll change the GPU stack. So the AMD and NVIDIA similar names no longer line up, or the pricing tiers are different, and people have trouble letting go of that. And we're like, no, we're comparing products that deliver similar performance in this example. The pricing may differ, and we're taking that into account, but you've got to pick something. But just picking sort of arbitrary names that they've just, let's call this one quality, but it's really performance. That's just, that's rife for abuse, right? If you start doing that kind of testing, because you know what they're going to do. It's the same old race to the bottom type thing. AMD will announce that, hey, we've overhauled our whole lineup, and now we're getting 20% better performance with the quality mode. And you find out they've just lowered the render resolution or something. So,
well, that's what Intel did with
yeah, that's
XeSS,
right.
which has like, I don't know, you could do all sorts of different things to make either XeSS look really good or look really bad, depending on how you test it.
Mhm.
Because, for example, if you were testing at the same render resolution, XeSS would be a lot slower. So you'd be testing all of these settings and be like, oh, XeSS looks really good. But then you'd have to mention at the end, oh, yeah, actually, it's like quite significantly slower.
Mhm.
So that really hurts, that side of the comparison. But then you do it the other way around where you measure at the same performance, then the render resolution is lower. So you compare that way and you're like, oh, okay, well, the render resolution is lower. So there's always going to be something that
I think
is sacrificed there. But
I think
in my opinion,
I was just saying, I think logically, right? What is the feature? Why do we have this feature? Why does it exist?
yeah,
It's not to enhance the visual presentation of the games, is it? We're
no,
doing it
not
to we're doing
really.
it like in some instances that could be true. I know some people will certainly argue that's true, but the real reason this technology has come about is to boost performance. That's, I think, first and foremost
Yep.
why we have it. So if that is correct, then logically the way you have tested, well, it's the most sound logic.
Yeah, the way I think about it is like there's kind of the only things that matter to the end user are the outputs of whatever the feature is. So how the feature works, the exact mechanisms going on, it doesn't really matter for end users. So for example, the render resolution of the upscaler is just like it could be anything really. It's the same as like what is the DLSS AI algorithm doing?
Mhm.
Like no one really knows,
Mhm.
but it's also not really relevant for end users. It's purely about what's the performance. That's an output that actually a user can see
Mhm.
or benefit from.
Mhm.
High performance is obviously better. And what's the visual quality? Those are the two main things. And it's always a balancing act. The more you increase the visual quality, the lower the performance gets generally, and vice versa. So for me, like those are the things that matter for users.
Mhm.
What's the frame rate? What's the visual quality? And so when testing these features, you don't want to have it getting to like a midpoint where the quality is different and the performance is different. You're just sort of like measuring things at no common ground.
Mhm.
You're just sort of going in and testing things randomly. I'm always about trying to make sure that one of the two areas you can match up as closely as possible. And it's much easier to match performance, the actual FPS numbers, than it is to match quality.
Mhm.
If you match quality, it's like it's a minefield of, and you would have seen from the videos how many different aspects to the visual quality are different between the different
Yeah, yeah.
upscalers. So it makes a lot more sense to just go, hey, let's make the performance the same for all of these, and then look at which one looks better. So yeah, I totally agree with you about like cheating and things like that. Like it's ripe for companies in the future just like renaming things. Like it doesn't even have to be the render resolution. AMD could come out and make some extremely taxing algorithm that analyzes each frame and does crazy processing on it, and then they'll be like, hey, this is still the quality mode. It's still the same render resolution, but performance is 20% lower. But let's not tell anyone about that. Or some reverse situation where they make it a really lightweight algorithm that works way worse, but is still the same render res, still the same, performance. So yeah,
Mm.
I think performance normalized testing is the way to go. And I've done it since DLSS 1 testing, really. The way that we were able to expose DLSS 1 as not really being any good was matching up the performance uplift that DLSS was providing compared to just other upscaling, which at the time wasn't really called upscaling, but it was just like lowering the resolution or use scale factors or whatever in games. And so, yeah, when NVIDIA was talking about, hey, this brings so much more performance, we were going in and going, okay, well, what else can you do to raise performance? Well, you can do this other type of resolution scaling, and oh, look, it actually looks a lot better. Or you can render at different resolutions and get different performance
Mhm.
or get different results. So
Mhm.
yeah, performance normalized testing with these things, I think, is going to be more important as things get more efficient, things change around. Maybe AMD will release some sort of AI scaling algorithm at some point. Maybe that's heavier to run. All those things need to be factored in, and each brand needs to be given, I guess, a fair opportunity to make the most efficient algorithm, I guess.
Yep. No, I totally agree. The way you went about it is the way I would have tackled it. And as we know, no matter which way you had have tackled it, there'd be someone that would be very upset, or a group of people that would be upset. And really, you could even go above and beyond and tackle the subject the 3 or 4 various ways that it could possibly be tackled. And there'll still be a group of people who are upset because you included one way that they believe is misleading and shouldn't have been included. So you just got to pick what you think's best, what makes the most sense logically, and go with that.
Yeah, that's right. And there's nothing wrong with comparing things in different ways and doing things in the way that, let's say you wanted to just have a look at, hey, which of these algorithms upscales the best from a given render resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not really factoring in the performance. It's more of like a tech demo sort of thing, a deep dive into how it works. So you sort of look, hey, this algorithm is more effective than this one from this render resolution. But when I'm assessing a feature overall, I'm trying to factor in all the sorts of different things that users care about. So yeah, there's other videos out there. My video includes some testing at the same quality settings. There's other videos out there that cover more of that tech demo side of things, looking at the same quality settings. So if you want to watch that, go be my guest. There are some really great videos out there that focus specifically on that. But yeah, performance normalized testing is probably how we're going to go about it for any future comparisons. But it's aside from that side of things, and to be fair, this is, again, we're complaining about like a minority of comments. I think most people understood what was the reason behind using performance normalized testing to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to see AMD are improving their upscaling features and things are getting better, because they were quite far behind. So not that FSR 3.1 really brings them into parity, but it's closer than it was, which is a good thing for people that are buying Radeon GPUs or even Intel GPUs. I've just been testing Intel GPUs recently. In a lot of games, you need to use FSR upscaling. So yeah, I think that was pleasing to see. And have you tested too much of it yourself, or you've just left that one to me?
I've definitely left that one to you. Obviously, I use the technologies from time to time. As far as testing goes, absolute nightmare. Like, no matter which way you choose to do it, there's the subjective component to that testing, which I absolutely loathe. I think you do a really good job of highlighting and showing all of those things. But yeah, I mean, when the results are like absolute, like you can show exactly how much faster something is than something else, there's still, I don't know, it's still difficult to I don't know, stuff like 1080p benchmarking, for example, the craziness surrounding that for gaming, that's annoying enough. But then having something that's subjective on top of that it's a layer of, I won't say, that I just don't want to deal with, basically. So you do a good job of it, and I'm glad you do it.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I mean, there's always been the discussion of like benchmarking with upscaling or without upscaling for like GPU reviews and things.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're still in this sort of minefield where most people are going to be playing with these features enabled, but they're not close enough that you can really use it for a lot of comparative testing. Like, there are times when it makes sense to do that, and there are times when it doesn't, but it's still not apples to apples. And I feel like there's going to be a time when, DLSS, FSR, XCSS, they're going to produce slightly different results at the end of the day because they work differently, and that's just the way it's going to be. But there is going to be a point at some point, hopefully, where it's going to be very difficult to tell the differences in any real sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like with these technologies, that's not the case yet. But there hopefully will be some point in the future where it makes more and more sense to include more upscale testing in GPU reviews where it's meant to be more apples to apples. Because theoretically, if there were very minor differences between the upscalers and most people were using them, that probably justifies testing it, but testing with them enabled for a GPU review. But while things are still, you can sort of tell that one doesn't quite do this thing as well, or there's some visual quality difference somewhere, at least in my opinion, it's still not at the level where that makes sense. And so for, upcoming GPU reviews, my recommendation would definitely still be to, include some of that testing, but the majority of it being your standard resolution, native res, 1080p, 1440p, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll get complaints whichever way you go with that, like all the previous videos you've ever done when these technologies have been available.
Yeah, that's right. We tried to avoid upscaling and keep the results as clean as possible, as apples to apples as possible. And we received quite a bit of backlash for that, and were accused of favoring AMD by ignoring technology such as DLSS, even though in our conclusions and our summaries of the products, we were heavily emphasizing the importance of DLSS as a key selling point. That wasn't good enough. We were not testing with it, and therefore we were ignoring it and favoring AMD. And then we had a whole heap of reasons for why we weren't doing that were sound and very logical reasons that any level-headed sort of person should be able to accept very easily. And that was not the case. So then we decided, how are we going to start including upscaled results? So we tried the FSR thing on both products because we wanted to keep it as apples to apples as possible. That created a huge controversy that we kind of exposed how ridiculous that was in a video that we made about the Reddit comments. And from that point forward, I've just started testing with DLSS quality and FSR quality. I don't like it. I don't think we should be doing it. But, I mean, we do make the videos for the people that watch them, and if that's what they want, and we did polls on it, and by and large people wanted some upscaling data to go along with the native data, so that's what we do now. I don't particularly like that data. I don't think it's necessarily fair. If anything, I think it's probably unfair on NVIDIA, which is the whole thing we tried to avoid from the get-go, but that sort of blew up in our face, so now we do it. And if FSR is as fast but doesn't look as good, I don't know what we do about that. My hands are tied on this one. It's okay, that's what you want. And that's the results we gave, and places like r/NVIDIA seemed as happy as they could possibly be with us, which is, not a glowing review, but they accepted that testing. They were happy with that. They wanted DLSS quality for their GPUs and FSR quality for Radeons, and somehow that made them feel better about the whole thing. I don't know why, but okay.
Yeah. It's a very tricky thing because, obviously some people have their opinions on how things should be done, and we have different opinions, and that's just the way things are sometimes. And it's very difficult to, do things that we think are correct, but also, you can't have people getting data that they don't find particularly useful. And I totally get it. Like, if you're playing with DLSS enabled and you're seeing benchmarks where DLSS is not enabled, you'll be like, well, what's going on there? Why wouldn't that feature be enabled? And you may not realize why that sort of testing is being done that way, but I can get that opinion because, most games I personally play with upscaling enabled most of the time, even on an RTX 4090. So, I totally get it. But hopefully, I feel like these things have been getting easier over time to handle, if anything, because back in the original days when there were things like DLSS 2 versus FSR 1, it's like the difference is there in some scenarios, especially if you were testing it like 1440p or 1080p, pretty significant in terms of the final quality. There were many more games where there'd be one game that has DLSS but not FSR. So then what do you do there? Do you enable it for NVIDIA and then just do nothing for the AMD cards? Like, is that fair? These days, most games include multiple features. The quality gap it's maybe a little closer. It's a little better over time. The features are getting more usable. There's more options now with things like XCSS. So over time, it's converged from being just almost impossible to include something like DLSS in benchmark charts to some of the time, it's usable, especially for like, I know you mostly use it for ray tracing. Obviously, a lot of cards are not powerful enough. Like, there's not a lot of point showing like 20 FPS on a GPU in ray trace native benchmarks when we know anyone playing that game that way will play it with like upscaling of some form enabled.
Yep.
let's move into Intel Power stuff
Oh, the
because,
Intel Power stuff. I did not see this coming.
well, I would have thought back at Computex or even before Computex that there would be no further discussion on Intel Power because they would have sorted it by now. But it turns out
No,
they haven't sorted it by now.
They were sorting it by the end of May, weren't they? That was taken care of. Did I miss something?
Well, did they say May 2024 or did they mean did they specify the year?
Actually, I'm not sure they did specify the year. So, yeah, maybe that was an assumption we all made incorrectly there.
But yeah, I think the latest updates. I mean, I've seen the video from Level 1 Techs from Wendell over there. Great video. There's been some follow up things from that. I think there was a GN video which I haven't watched as of this point, but there just seems to be more and more things being uncovered. Like there doesn't seem to be an end in sight for this. Like we were talking back at Computex about Intel still figuring out the various different power profiles and stuff, and now, things have changed, and then people are still seeing crashing issues. There's been some reports I've seen of people struggling with RMAs and feedback from Intel about this to consumers. So I don't know, where do you think things stand at the moment? You've been following it a bit more than I have.
Yeah, less. I don't know. I was going to say I'm less and less sure as I get more and more information, which normally it goes the other way. Like, for example, we had the AM5 CPUs burning up in the socket disaster for a bit there that AMD did address. That was SoC voltage, mostly on ASUS boards because they were hammering the SoC voltage harder than most of the other boards. That was kind of like you could pinpoint that down to a problem. SoC voltage, addressed that, problem solved, moving along, no drama since. I'm really starting to think this Intel thing is kind of like the perfect storm of disasters. The power profile stuff, how much of a problem was that? Some people said, the new power profiles solved their stability issues. But, was there degradation taking place before that was addressed, where some CPUs degraded to the point where now the power profiles don't work? And that's why Intel has this baseline spec that they're saying isn't for the K-SKU parts, but then you can still use them on the K-SKU parts, and they mostly exist for those Core i9 parts. So that's weird. I don't know why. Like, why create that really exaggerated step where you're just locking these CPUs that were running between 300 and 400 watts down to 125? Why have that option at all? Like, it seems like if the motherboards were just running without power limits and without current limits and all that sort of stuff, I mean, that comes under power limits, without limits, then you would just say, hey guys, look, it's 253/253 for PL1, PL2. Here are the current limits. Here are the turbo timers and all that sort of stuff. Not you need those if it's at PL1, PL2 at 253 watts. But here are the specifications that you're meant to be running at. Just run at those. But then they've gone, but also then here's a sort of dialed down performance profile, which is unclear if that's the default or not. I mean, this is still all really wishy-washy. I'm not even sure, what's what, because, they use words like default, standard. There's that much weird terminology, like recommended. They all sort of mean roughly the same thing. But then you get a performance profile, which is 125 watt / 253 watt. And then you get a base profile. So I don't know why we're getting all these weird profiles. It seems like the lower profiles are designed for people who have run into degradation, and Intel just doesn't want to swap those CPUs out or deal with that process. So they can just tell them run the lower profile and see if that solves the problem. But then you have all this new information from Wendell and also the stuff we learnt from partners over there. It seems to me that there's probably something even bigger going on. What that is, I'm not 100% sure, whether there's like a fundamental problem with the CPUs or the silicon due to the design is just degrading more rapidly than expected, sort of almost regardless of the settings. I don't know. And of course, there are people who have these CPUs who are overclocking them and using them and had no problems at all, at least under their test conditions, like whether they would would pass a rigorous validation process. I don't know. My 14900K, for example, never crashes, but then I rarely use it. It's more of a benchmarking CPU. So there's something big going on here, and it may not just be one thing. It may be a series of issues. And I saw people replying to Wendell's video saying, this is why Intel should have just come out and addressed this to stop the speculation, because the speculation's so damaging for them. And I'm like, maybe the speculation's not as damaging as the truth. Maybe there is a big issue here, and that's why they haven't come out yet. Like, the longer it goes on, the more that points towards it being a serious, probably non-addressable issue. It's like, you've just got to read the room a bit, do some basic detective work. Like when AMD was unwilling to comment on their stance on FSR and DLSS in these upcoming games, like they couldn't address very simple, very basic questions that they could normally just use some sort of PR speak. They were just like stonewalling. They're like, nope, we're not addressing that at all. Wait, don't even ask about that. Pretend that's not a thing. It's a crazy coincidence that all these games we're sponsoring don't have DLSS in them, or if they do get them, it's well after the fact. So don't talk about that. The reason why they didn't talk about that, we believe, is because what we accused them of doing was what they were doing. And if Intel could simply run some tests, work out what was going on, release a microcode or BIOS update, and everyone would go on their merry way, then they would be more than happy to do that. The fact that that hasn't been the case, and that we're getting more reports of, servers, workstation motherboards, not overclocking motherboards, workstation motherboards probably using ECC memory because, they're designed to run gaming servers, but they're using K-SKU CPUs because they want that high IPC, that high single core performance, and they're crashing at alarming rates. There's something going on. There's something weird there.
Yeah, my thoughts, having seen it now for, it's been happening for several months now, obviously, these issues, it feels like everything that Intel's been saying so far, and a lot of it isn't, necessarily like an official statement. There's been a few official statements over time, but there's been more that we've had to piece together from what they're telling motherboard vendors and, changing the power profiles and things, is that it all seems very like beta testing, depending on how you pronounce it.
Yeah, like they've rushed to address it. And initially,
not necessarily, I don't know whether it's rushed, but just they're changing things, and then they're trying to evaluate whether those changes have actually solved the problems or not.
Okay.
And it seems to be the case where the changes that they keep making are not actually sufficient for resolving the problems. So they keep effectively just finding more problems. So, again, this is just my speculation, and it's based on things that have happened so far, but it seems to be a situation where, Intel thinks initially that it's a power profile issue. So they change the power profiles. Then they down power the CPUs. They figure out, oh no, that wasn't it. So maybe it was the current limits. Maybe the motherboard vendors blowing up the CPUs with too much current was the problem. So they create a more stringent power profile, changes those sorts of things, enforces all the sorts of various limits in the BIOS. They do that. Then, hang on a moment. We thought that was the case, but we've implemented that. We're telling people, hey, run this CPU with these various power profiles. That's still not working for every customer that we've got. We really thought that the baseline or performance profile would have been the solution based on what we've seen. But no, hang on a moment. We're still getting a few reports, unusual reports of these CPUs crashing. And if it gets to the point where they've implemented various different solutions, thinking each time, yeah, this will be it, especially back when they made that statement that have some answer by May, if they're going, initially we think this is a power profile issue. What we're going to do, we're going to change the power profiles, we're going to get people to use them, and then by the end of May, that will have worked. We'll have the evidence that it's worked. We can tell everyone that it's worked, and now we update everyone on the profiles. But if that hasn't worked, then yeah, as you say, they're kind of running into more issues and maybe a bigger issue with some problem with how the CPU works over time. And hearing from, the Wendell information with super micro boards, which, as you say, they're not overclocking boards at all, those running into issues with these processes is very surprising. It was good to get that perspective of different, hearing from different customers, people using these for different workloads, and them having, significant crash issues. So it's well worth watching Wendell's video to get the full breakdown on, where those parts were used what they were used for. I think it was like gaming servers and things
Mhm.
like that, and the error logs and things that were being looked into. But
Yeah,
yeah, if they're sitting here in July, we don't have any real official information. Things keep changing.
mhm.
Like what we're hearing from motherboard makers is that Intel's still changing things. It points to Intel not having actually found the root cause just yet, which is concerning.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, as you said, this is all pure speculation on our behalf. I mean, some of it's based on information we've been told. I don't know, how speculative that information was, but we were told.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, at Computex, we were told by multiple sources beyond a shadow of a doubt that silicon degradation is occurring for these CPUs, which is why they were once stable, and then these problems have developed over time. That's something Wendell found as well, though with the data we had available, it was hard to really pinpoint that. But it seems pretty clear the silicon degradation is occurring, because the 1300K has been out for quite a while now, and game servers and game developers and gamers weren't really, at least to my knowledge, complaining about this early on and for quite a while
Mm.
after the release. And then it all sort of started to occur, or at least occur more frequently, because even when this story first broke, people were under the impression that it was an individual compiler issue. There was a single specific workload that did something that ran into hardware stability issues with those Core i9 and possibly the Core i7 K-SKU CPUs, and it wasn't too much of an issue that just needed to be addressed. Probably some sort of microcode change, and that'd be solved. And then then we got more reports, and the story just kept developing, and it goes beyond just a single compiler or a single workload. Seems like there's many heavy workloads that are causing these CPUs to come unstuck, and it is hardware failures as well. So, when you get crashing on a system, and this is why we don't jump too much on the stability stuff when we're benchmarking, it's like, what caused that crash? And, you can dig in and try and work that out. Usually it'll be some sort of software related problem or something like that. But with these servers, they're actually crashing due to a hardware failure, not a software failure. So essentially, with the software working as it should, these systems should just run indefinitely. Like, they really shouldn't crash. They probably only see downtime for security updates, uh, and maybe basic maintenance, but really it shouldn't be due to hardware failures in the sense of crashing. So yeah, really concerning, especially when they had some AMD data to pull on there as well from Ryzen CPUs, and the crashing there was almost non-existent, or in some instances was non-existent compared to what they were seeing with those Intel CPUs. So something weird's going on. It's probably going to be a little while yet before we have a clear understanding of it, if ever, really. I'm not really sure where this story goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles with like just silicon degradation that causes so many different headaches. Like, is it because they haven't binned the CPUs effectively? There's been reports of, I think in the Wendell story, they get sent trays of CPUs. They have to just pick and choose, try and find the ones that work the best. Is that because Intel is just sending are they sending used CPUs in those trays, and some of them have been used too much, or is it just that the CPUs to begin with were being binned too loosely so that they can't actually run properly? When is the silicon degradation occurring? Is that the same for every single CPU, or are some CPUs a bit more resistant to it and they've just messed up that process? It's once you start having that sort of thing occurring, I can imagine the Intel engineers are finding it very difficult to figure out exactly what's going on and how that applies to all of their customers, because degradation in that way is not something that's just like, yep, you use this CPU for 3 months doing this and X amount of degradation occurs.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that your CPU is just a bit more resilient to that. It was a bit better fabricated. It works a little better. It doesn't degrade as much. And then you get a different one. It degrades a lot more. It becomes unstable, crashes earlier than expected. And that's just like trying to solve that, man. Oh, it's so much worse than trying to figure out like, oh yeah, it was just the code was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So change the code. Now it works. It's like, well, at 90 days in, it's working, but 94 days was the limit for that particular workload. But another workload, maybe we could have run it for 100 days. Yeah, so I don't envy that. And yeah, I think some of this story will probably be somewhat buried by new CPU launches, things like Zen 5. I mean, these Intel parts haven't exactly been major sellers. So the amount of people that are, directly affected by it, not just looking into the story for the interest's sake or to dunk on Intel for whatever reason, most people are probably going to be buying and continuing to buy Ryzen CPUs, and Zen 5 is going to, hopefully spark some interest there. But if they can't fix it before, next gen CPUs from Intel come out, I don't know whether that will have any sort of impacts to their reputation going into a future generation. It's hard to say, because usually people buy Intel CPUs for, especially those type of CPUs, for the best gaming performance, the best stability, the best overall experience. And if there's been all these reports of K series processors crashing and not working, and then they're going into a new generation, I don't know. Intel's loyal customers going to be less loyal? It's possible.
Yeah, it's a big problem for sure. They need to work it out, and well, they needed to work it out months ago. So, but yeah, they definitely need to work it out before the next generation, because you can't, like, reviewers are going to be talking about it. Everyone's going to be talking about it. Like, do you buy these new CPUs? Are they stable? Like, they still haven't addressed the ongoing issues with the previous generation, new architecture, new socket, but still those concerns there. It's not a good thing. Like, if AMD CPUs were still failing, and let's be honest, the AM5 issue was nowhere near as widespread. Like, it was not widespread at all, that issue. And there was still quite a lot of drama made about that, which, was definitely an issue, don't get me wrong, but nothing like this. And if that was still ongoing, like your AM5 CPU, like the high-powered connector on the NVIDIA graphics cards, that, will your card melt? Maybe. But yeah, if your AMD CPU was maybe going to melt, that would be a huge problem for Zen 5. Like, people would be far less willing to invest in a platform that, might have your CPU fail. So those things need to be addressed really quickly.
Yeah, it causes issues like what AMD had to deal with Radeon driver concerns for so many years. Like, you get a few years of not ideal stability for your GPU, and suddenly the reputation is changed to AMD GPUs have stability problems. And if they work hard to resolve it at some point, if you let it linger for too long, then it hurts the reputation. Things like the black screen issue on the what was it, the 5700 XTs, that era of GPUs. I think it was the original RDNA that had those problems, wasn't it?
Yep, that's right.
And hard to replicate, wasn't affected for everyone, but it took them a little while to release driver updates and things to solve that. And you'd see comments with RDNA 2, RDNA 3 coming out, people being like, "Oh, is that still a concern with these products?" So if you can't solve it quickly, those sorts of things tend to linger. And obviously, Radeon drivers that's been a thing going back, I don't know, back when I started with PC gaming and really got into it. It was kind of like that was a big discussion point, and it still persists today, even though for the most part, personally, I don't have too many issues with Radeon drivers in all the times that I use Radeon cards. So even if like a new Intel generation comes out and works just fine, there's no stability issues, people using them for years, and it's all good, thumbs up on it on that front. There's still going to be people who, they're not really following these stories closely, but might have heard a few things. Oh yeah, wasn't there that one time that like Intel CPUs crashed games and they took a while to solve? Like, is that a thing? That those are the sorts of things that you don't want to have linger. So
yeah, that's right.
I wouldn't want to see them try and bury it underneath. Like, you don't want to have them bury it under a new CPU launch. They need to come out and say, "We fixed that. Not an ongoing issue. Here's the next gen. We're confident in this. It's going to work." But
I find it humorous that I mean, I guess you could say that like 8th gen, 9th gen, and for a while there, even from Skylake on, they were sort of refreshing CPUs because it was the same basic architecture with more cores glued on. So I guess it's not a new thing for Intel, but it is still, and I'm not, I'm just making a joke out of this, right? It's somewhat humorous that they decided to refresh 13th gen as 14th gen and it has these massive problems. Like, they would have been better off using because obviously 12th gen doesn't have these problems. It doesn't seem to anyway. I don't know. I haven't seen any reports of 12th gen CPUs having these stability issues. They would have been better off refreshing 12th gen, taking a bit longer to get 13th gen out the door than refreshing the troubled generation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, you release this generation that, unknowingly is going to end up being a disaster, and then you end up refreshing that same generation, which I guess...
Yeah, and it doesn't exactly offer much for people. Like, it wasn't like the 14th gen parts were like, wow, that's bringing awesome new things to the table. It's like, it's a little bit faster and that's about it. And also we've brought potentially greater issues and more CPUs that are brought into this whole stability problem.
And by being a little bit faster, it's kind of compounding the issue. Like, it's pushed a little bit harder. Yeah. So if there were stability issues previously, you can bet there are now. So it's not like there was some sort of architectural refinement. It's a straight refresh. And if you're going to do that, which AMD's done with Radeon GPUs many times in the past, but they've reduced the prices. So it's a new brand that's we're essentially resetting the MSRP officially a bit lower. So it still sucks, but at least there's something there. Whereas this was like, this is a refresh in every sense. Like, it's the same price, the same performance, the same product. It has a new name, guys. So maybe look at buying it. But yeah, just funny that they refreshed that generation in the way that they did of all the generations they could have done that with over the years.
So yeah, we'll keep trying to follow that story as much as we possibly can. We've certainly been on it for 6 years now. The whole power situation now it's folded into these stability problems. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. And yeah, hopefully, we talk about this in sort of like, it's all funny that these things happen at times. But honestly, I would like to see Intel fix this. Like, it would be great if there was a solution that didn't impact customers too much. It was a definitive solution. It worked. Affected customers were made good in some way, and they can move on, because that would be the best for the CPU market. There's just having these sort of things linger and affect competition and make people, cement AMD in sort of some sort of monopoly position is not the sorts of things that makes for a healthy CPU market.
No.
You want to see as much competition as possible, as many good products available for people to buy. So let's hope that Intel can get things working and get things moving in the right direction for them.
Yeah, because sort of on that note, I've seen a lot of comments, and my opinion is these are absolutely garbage comments from people saying, well, that's what you get for buying, one of these power-hungry K-SKU CPUs. And it's like, no.
It should work.
It should work for one, but also there are valid reasons to buy these CPUs. Like, their single-threaded performance is impressive. It's why game servers were using them over something like a 7950X or 7950X 3D, whichever one, because they do have superior single-threaded performance. Like, there is some merit there to buying one. And the performance overall is still excellent. Yeah, like, the 7800X 3D might generally offer a little bit more performance. We're talking single-digit gains on average while using a lot less power, which makes it the more sensible purchase, in my opinion, and which is why we recommend that CPU. For no other reason why we recommend that CPU other than the obvious. But I could still understand why someone would run a 1300K or a 14900K processor. I mean, in my gaming system, I'm still using a 1200K a 1200KS. The reason I'm using the 1200KS is because I don't want to use it for benchmarking, and it's a really powerful gaming CPU, so I'll chuck it in my gaming system, and it's worked well. It's been good for me. But yeah, just that's not a good comment. Basically, they should work, and you're not silly for buying one. They are great gaming CPUs, or they should be, and they could be.
So just want to quickly wrap up. Our main part of this discussion was just a brief... It was still Intel related, but maybe Intel related in a more positive way. Is that I've spent the last couple of weeks using Intel Arc GPUs more significantly. Probably the most that I've ever used an Arc GPU for gaming. Obviously, I've tested the vast majority of games that I've got in my game library on Intel Arc and found that they generally work pretty well, which I think bodes pretty well for the future generations of Intel GPUs. They've obviously come a long way from games just generally not work. Well, not generally not working, but there were certainly a few problem games for them at launch. Things Obviously, older games, there were terrible performance at launch. There were games that crashed, had issues with various parts of it. But these days, at least based on what I've seen, not that I tested every single game for hours at a time. A lot of them, some games you fire them up and within a few minutes you're like, yeah, this is probably going to work pretty fine if it's like a lightweight older title. But yeah, my experiences with Arc were generally pretty good. And obviously Intel, since that video has come out yesterday, has emailed me being like, our driver teams are on this. They're looking through all the results of the video. We're going to go through and try and fix as many of those things as possible. They did bring up that, Batman Arkham Knight, one of the games I showed in the video, is crashing on launch. That is a game issue. They've provided a fix. You can look it up on their website. If you want to play that game on Arc, you have to swap out a DLL file to basically override how the game works so that it works with Arc, which is an unfortunate sort of hack that they have to do for that game, just because it was made before Arc GPUs were available. But yeah, this has always been the case with Intel GPUs, really. Every time that we've brought up issues, they've been like, yep, we're on it. We'll try to get that fixed. We'll try to get that working. And generally, they've been able to get things working. It's just to the degree that which they work is, I think, still a little bit up in the air. Titles that we've brought up in the past, like The Last of Us Part 1, still doesn't run that well on Arc. Starfield, that didn't really work at launch, still has issues now. So it's a work in progress, but it's good to see things working better than I expected, to be honest. I thought, I'm going to test 250 games here, and I'm expecting like lots of these older obscure games that I have to like not work, and they pretty much all worked. So that was good to see, I guess.
The reason I haven't been super on board with recommending and pushing the Arc GPUs to date is just because they have had quite a bit of competition from Radeon GPUs at those price points. And while there are definitely some benefits to the Arc GPU, such as, generally speaking, a larger VRAM buffer, which is a handy thing to have for sure, whenever I've tested just a dozen games, there's always been one that I couldn't get results for because of some dumb issue or just it not working at all.
Yeah. And that's probably still the case today. Like if you were testing a range of modern games, you probably would run into a title like Dragon's Dogma 2, which, I mean, it works. You could show it in the charts, but the performance is like disgustingly bad.
Yeah. So you've really got to factor that in, that you're recommending a product where you're testing just 12 games for review and one or two of them didn't work. Like, getting Halo Infinite to work forever was really annoying. Sometimes
it still doesn't run super well, that one.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is there, but sometimes it would work and there'd be no textures or really low textures. Other times the performance would be bad. And every time I speak to Intel, they're aware of it and it's going to be fixed. And then, they did fix it, but somehow that got walked back in the latest driver. So use the older driver, but that still has a texture issue. We'll fix that. And yeah, I haven't tested it for a while. You're telling me there's still issues, so that's not great. So there's ongoing issues there with Halo Infinite, but there are other games as well. So it's like, at that point, I probably recommend spending, sometimes it's been $20, $30 more for an equivalent Radeon GPU. Just do that. And
it usually, like, at least when I looked for the video, it's not even really the case where the Arc products are cheaper. In a lot of cases, you'd be getting a better or more powerful Radeon card for the same amount of money, which is, it's a pretty tough position for Arc to be in. As I mentioned in the video, I think Arc does need to be pretty noticeably cheaper to mitigate those sorts of concerns. And like Intel could look at my video, go through, fix the 30 odd games that had various concerns. I mean, some of the concerns are like launched onto the iGPU. It's not a really significant issue, but let's say they go through, they make some of the games a bit more playable, they fix some of the graphical issues or whatever, there's still always going to be that risk. And and by risk, I mean, there could be a risk of a future game having some sort of Dragon's Dogma-like problem or Starfield-like problem, and you just can't sell a card at the same price while that's still the case. They need to have as I mentioned, like a proven track record over a period of time where you could sort of go, hey, the last year, all these games that came out day one worked super well on Arc, had no issues, ran well. That's the sort of experience that you'd want to see for a period of time to justify buying at the same sort of price as a Radeon card or a GeForce card, though in those sort of performance tiers, generally Radeon is the better product. So Hopefully the next generation of products is a bit more competitive on the price to performance front, so that people can look at the cards and go, yeah, it's powerful. If I wanted to play, the popular games I'm interested in, it's hard to pass up on that level of performance. But you got to factor in the compatibility side of things. But the performance it's tempting me. Whereas I feel like most of the lineup at the moment is not quite tempting enough, despite how generally it works okay.
I was just having a look at some pricing while you were talking, and yeah, what you're saying is correct. Like an RX 6600 is the same price as an ARC A750, both 8GB graphics cards, $180 US each. Like, people keep saying to me, you keep saying you want more competition, which I do. Like, we want Intel to be competitive with CPUs. We want them to be competitive with GPUs. That's what I want to happen, but I can't force that. Like, I can't say everyone buy ARC A750 so we can help Intel better compete and ensure that their graphics program continues to exist. Like,
it has to be a product that's worth recommending.
I'm recommending you guys that as a product reviewer, my job is to test these products in depth and let you know which one offers you the best value and is the best investment at a given price. And the truth is, the ARC A750 isn't it. The RX 6600 is a better value product for various reasons. But the A750 is an improving product. It is starting to compete very well, but it needs to be cheaper in order to justify. Just like we say that an RX 7600 needs to be cheaper than an RTX 4060. Even though it's a little bit faster, in certain instances, it does lack things like a superior upscaler. Don't want to mention ray tracing at that performance tier, because I absolutely do not believe that the RTX 4060 is a ray tracing card or can use it to any sort of useful degree. Anyway, not to go down that rabbit hole, Tim. Yeah, love to see it improve, but at this point in time, it's not doing enough.
Sort of as I said in the video, like, the performance side of things is not really something that I covered too much. So it's also possible that while a lot of games work on ARC, that especially older titles that haven't received like extensive driver optimizations, it's possible they don't run as well as you'd see on a Radeon card that had day one drivers for games 10 years ago, which are still, baked into the driver stack. So while it is the case that, you can go back and play Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag just fine, it may run better on a Radeon card, which is not something that I had the ability to really test in that video without spending weeks more on it. If I had an ARC GPU, like, there's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it works pretty well across most of the games I'd want to play. If the pricing was right, it's a card that you could recommend. Whereas I feel like at the launch of ARC, that you would not say that. You'd be like, yeah, you're getting into a minefield here. You're probably going to have to send a few emails to Intel to get your various configurations fixed. And there were even just like issues with the driver software, like things just not working or features not being included. It's not really the case today. Those things are generally fixed. It's just that I think the main thing for Intel now is competing on price to performance, making the cards hard to pass up, and in the background, while that's the case, continuing to improve game compatibility. And based on what we've seen, they certainly have improved that over time. So it's not like there's no evidence of them improving and we're just going off on a whim and saying, yeah, in the future they'll fix all these games. They've shown that they are fixing games over time. So yeah, we'll see what the future brings for there. But yeah, it's always interesting to go and use a product that you wouldn't normally use and really see how it works. And hopefully that data has been useful for people if they were tossing up like ARC products and want to see how it works across a large variety of games. So yeah, we'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll briefly talk about our boring, maybe exciting, because we haven't talked about it for a month, lives. All right, Steve, we're back. You're building stuff, I've heard.
Yes.
Well, you spoke about it a bit at the start of the episode. What stage are you at with that?
We were planning on building a 9x9 room on the back of the studio, and that was going to be great. A few different things we were planning on doing with that. And because my property is on a bit of a hill, we had the opportunity to excavate a bit to create a garage underneath. and that wasn't in the initial plans. And then I decided, you know what, we'll design that up and see if we can make that happen. So we have. So we've moved out a boatload of dirt and rock and stuff, and now there's going to be essentially twice the job. But yeah, it's been fun. So that's going well. The stage at the moment is most of the excavation, pretty much all the excavation work's done now. It's drilling holes in extremely tough ground, just about 1.5 meters down, filling them up with a lot of concrete and with some steel in them. So doing that for the foundations, so that's good. And yeah, apart from that, there's been I haven't mowed my lawns in forever. So I don't think I've.
Well, it's been not much rain, so
I think I've
at least out my way.
Yeah, I think I might have done it once since Computex. Definitely not.
I've done it no time since Computex.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have or not. But yeah, so there's nothing happening on that front. So it's mostly just building and working inside. So I enjoy that. Weather's been a bit iffy though, so that's holding us up. But that's all right. When the weather's bad, I just come inside and do some benchmarking and do non-boring life stuff. Yep, so that's all going well. Bought a bunch of new tools, got a new welder. So the welder I bought to do your place, I'm still using. So that welder, I think it's a Unimig Viper 185. So it's a little single phase 240 volt, 185 amp welder. I'm predominantly use that with gasless 0.9 wire, and that works a treat. Does a really great job. What a powerful machine, really, for what it is. But I recently bought their compact 250, which is still a single phase unit, but it's a big mother. Takes 15 kilogram spools, and I'm using that now with argon gas. And at the moment, I've got 1.2 mil wire in there. So that's been a fun treat. You can do some pretty cool welds with that one. So I've been learning that and playing around with it. So that's been fun. But yeah, it's a bit of a weapon, at least compared to what I'm used to. And yeah, I bought just a heap of other tools. I've got a new, bigger bandsaw, stuff like that. So doing all the fun stuff down the shed there, Tim, building things. And I've actually made a ton of stuff. So I've put together my fuel station. You know, I was telling you about my fuel bomb.
Yeah.
So the fuel bomb hasn't exploded yet, so that's good. But I've got 200 litres of petrol and 200 litres of diesel now available all the time for the machines and stuff. And I welded up some pallets that I can pick up with the skid steer forks and move them around, put them on the trailer, take them to the service station, fill them up with the appropriate fuel and bring them back. And they've been working a treat. So they're all automatic pumps and everything. So it works like, when you go to the service station, you got the automatic pump and all that. So that's cool.
You go through that, right? Because I think petrol doesn't have that long of a shelf life, right? Like
I don't think
it stops working after a few months.
No, you get at least 6 months, I would have thought. I don't know the exact, ratings on that. Diesel would be similar. You wouldn't want to go beyond 12 months, I wouldn't have thought. Having said that, I had a chainsaw that was sitting there with the 2-stroke in it for like 3 years. I just shook the crap out of it, started up. There was barely any smoke and it worked a treat. I was like, should I change the fuel in this? I definitely should. I didn't, and it worked fine. I also had a petrol generator, one of the 9 kVA DeWalt ones. I think it's 9.8. And I left that in the shed with probably 10 litres in it. And it was almost 3 years before I used it, because we've got the big generator now, so we obviously don't use it anymore.
Yeah.
So again, I was like, the thing weighs 95 kilograms. So I try and flip this on its head and, siphon or just dump the fuel out of it. Anyway, it went first go. I let it just use all the fuel, run like a treat. So I think there's definitely a recommended shelf life, but it's probably determined by contaminants and things like that, as to
and
how
probably
it
what
ages.
it's used for as well, like how much performance you actually need out of the fuel.
That's right.
If it's not that much.
Look, I wouldn't go putting it in an AMG, but but for my lawnmower or my generator, yeah, you're right. But to answer your question, I use a crap load of fuel. So for the petrol, I've got my skid steer, which we've been using about 30 litres a day doing this project on. So we fill that up daily, or just almost, probably a little bit over it. Probably 1.2 I'm going to go with, Tim. tanks per day on that.
Sure. Yep.
My Hustler mower takes 40 litres, and that'll do probably 3 to 4 mows.
Yep.
I've got a UTV, a 1000cc UTV. That's very fuel efficient. Only fill that up once every probably month. Because I don't know how many kilometers we do around the backyard in it, but it's very fuel efficient, and we don't usually wring its neck too much. And then just things like chainsaws and stuff, which use bugger all. The diesel stuff is mostly for the generator, but you're right. If we don't have power outages, then I'm left with 200 litres of diesel, and you don't want to leave that for too long. So the plan there is I've got a diesel car. So if we get 6 months in, for example, I'll just won't take the car to the servo. The car does about 1,100 kilometres off a tank. I think it's about 60 litres, something like that. So I'll just use it all that way for a few months.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, I've Balin's got a diesel car. My father-in-law has a diesel car. So if I get desperate, I can shout everyone free diesel, and then I'll go fill it up again. Because it's obviously good to have it there if the power goes out for a week, and getting it immediately can be difficult because everyone's lined up at the local service stations and stuff. Because usually the power knocks out the closest 2 or 3. But the excavator I hired to do the excavation was using about 60 litres of it a day. So I'm going to have to fill it up again. But anyway, that's fun fuel stuff. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, out this way, I haven't been doing too many projects. The project I did complete in the last couple of months was installing some irrigation into my garden, which I've been wanting to do for a while. So I've got like an automated irrigation system in my veggie garden at the moment. I'm planning to put a similar one into my fruit tree area as well, which just works really well. Hooked up to my tanks, you just powers on a pump, and then has like a little valve in it that you can just control using your phone, or set up like different alerts. So if there's like the soil sensors are saying, hey, your soil's pretty dry, it can just automatically start watering them, which obviously isn't needed, and it's currently winter here in Australia, isn't needed for the moment, but I didn't want to start working on that when it actually need to be watering the plants. So it's all just went to Bunnings, grabbed a variety of different things. I've got, obviously I mentioned, I think on the podcast a while back, so avid listeners will have heard about my weather station that I installed at my house, which is
before I want to interrupt, I have questions. So for the water, what type of delivery method are you using, Tim? Like, are they, because I know you like your Lego and stuff. So did you go down the rabbit hole of all the different kinds of fittings you can use, or have you just gone like with a drip system?
Yeah, so I've used not the dripper pipes. So you can get like the dripper pipes where you put that into the garden bed and then it just drips out water. I've gone with like, they're kind of like movable sprayers, like small dripper sprayer heads. So for some of like the planter boxes that I've got, I might only have like a couple of plants in it. So I don't want to be like watering the whole area with drippers, just dripping onto dirt that's not necessary. So they've got like little adjustable heads on them and stuff, and stakes that go into the ground. So I can there's like 4 per planter box. I can just move them around to wherever the plants are, or, dial up the water a bit on them so they water the whole area if I'm growing like lettuce or something that's going to take up the whole box area. So, I went with sort of a more complicated system.
A highly precise, very targeted watering system. I like it.
Yeah, so there's like the small, I think they're like 4 mil tubes that go into like larger water delivery pipes, or whatever you
Probably
call them.
The 16 mil or something.
Yeah, things like that. And then those all go into like, splitters and adapters and stuff to get into larger pipes. And
you would have been loving it. Yeah, Tim just goes down to Bunnings and he's like, this is probably just enough options, and you just grabbed everything and you tried them all out.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I can imagine you having a lot of fun with that. Oh, that's good. So back to your weather station.
So, the existing stuff that was attached coming out of my water tanks, I've got 75,000 litres of water tanks. So there's hopefully if there's like a good rain season, there'll be a lot of water to be used in the garden. And all that stuff was just like existing Bunnings stuff. So it's very easy to hook in, use the exact same sort of systems that they've got, and just, adapt it down from bigger pipes to smaller pipes.
Bunnings is like our Lowe's.
Yeah, it's like a big hardware store where you can get all your outdoor needs, really. So So yeah, I've got an EcoWit weather station, and they've released a couple of I think they've got like a water timer thing and like a smart switch thing. So you use the smart switch on the pump that pumps the water out of the water tank, and then the smart what is it, like I think it's like a Wit Flow or something. It's like a little box that you plug into your water system, and that gives you flow information, and it can time. I can say, hey, I want to give 200 liters of water to my garden, plug that into the system, and then hook it up to various different sensors and things, so it knows like, hey, if it hasn't rained for a week, give it 200 liters of water. That can all be programmed in. So yeah, over the summer period, I'll probably dial that in, get all the algorithms working well, so that the plants can be watered optimally and make sure the water's nice and moist for growing. So yeah, it's been good. It only took a couple of days to do the whole system, and it was taking me to thoroughly water the garden each time. It was probably like half an hour plus per occasion by hand. So yeah, you spend a couple of days. It's going to save me a lot of time in the future, just being able to have it all either work manually or automated. Just hit a button, waters everything, all good. So yeah, I'll be putting in a similar system to the fruit trees, but that will not be with sprays. That will be just like drip irrigation around the base of the trees. Bury that a little bit into the ground, put mulch over. That will work, I think. Yeah, a bit better for delivering to the roots of larger trees, but for smaller things, I think the sprays will work well. But yeah, so that's going to save me some watering time while also having a bit of fun hooking up systems and things like that.
Yeah, knowing you'll make it so complicated that it ends up needing about half an hour of maintenance per day just to keep it all functioning.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully not. The built-in software that they've got with the EcoWit system works pretty well. Yeah. It's probably not as advanced as I would like with some of the if-then sort of statements that you could do for different features. Like I think you can control it based on weather or soil, but maybe if you want to do both at the same time, that would be a bit too complicated. But a lot of people really like the sort of open source Home Assistant thing, which I've looked into a few times but haven't set up yet. But basically, it's like more advanced versions of that, and you can hook it into all your smart lights in your house if you've got any, and all those sorts of things. So yeah, the only issue that I've got to sort out is making sure that if the water system is continued to be pressurized over a long period of time, that it doesn't leak or drip anywhere. Because normally I would just turn off the water tap directly out of the tank. But if that needs to be hooked up and pressurized all of the time,
you can automate that.
I'd hope so.
By episode 500, I can't wait to hear where we're at on this.
Well, it's sort of the beginnings of first you become a homeowner, so then you can start actually putting these things in your house, and it makes sense to fully automating everything. I think my partner's really keen on having like motorized blinds, so which is like, it doesn't take too long to open a blind, but sure, we can try figure that out. You don't want to
waste time with that sort of stuff, Tim. It's got to be automated.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll get into all of that, but yeah, I'm not like super crazy on needing like every single switch in my house being some sort of digital automated switch or something like that. But for a few key things, like it would be nice to have, watering of my plants so I can grow things and not have to deal with that every day and stand out there and water things. So that seemed like an obvious place to start with automation, and then we'll go from there. But if people like have had good experiences with Home Assistant and those things for these areas, I'd love to hear from you in the comments on the YouTube video. So yeah, share your thoughts on what things can be like, what are good products to use and those sorts of things. I'll be keen to hear. So
yeah, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole quite how you have, but my experience generally with this sort of stuff is works really well initially, but then needs a lot of maintenance to keep it all, work. Like drip lines clog up, for example. So, it needs to be replaced. But yeah, it still probably saves you time in the long run. But yeah, I'm keen to see how you go with it anyway, because your attention to detail will be next level on this. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting, like, I'm definitely expecting the pipes and stuff to get clogged and need maintenance and stuff over time. So that's that's just standard irrigation stuff. It's not going to last forever. You're going to need to replace a few things. But the way I've done it, should be pretty, at least for the veggie garden side of things, should be pretty easy to replace pipes if needed. It's all above ground piping, just attached to
Yep.
fences and things. So
Yeah, putting
should be pretty
I
straightforward.
don't know if this is something people do or not, but just with my limited experience on this sort of stuff, putting a filtration system straight out of your tank will probably save you a lot of headaches, because the tanks tend to get a bit of gunk in the bottom of them, which is where you suck the water out. And they have, because I imagine it's water collection from your roof of your house, so you get bits of grit and stuff in there, and that's what blocks all the heads of any of the sprayers and the drippers. So if you can have a 3-stage filtration system straight out of the tank into all your gear, that'll probably save you many headaches. It'll make it last a lot longer with less maintenance. You'd think it's unnecessary because you don't need to filter out bacteria and whatnot to what you're giving the plants, but yeah, those heads, you just need a grain of dirt to come out of the tank and then go straight in the end of that head, and the thing just doesn't work anymore. So I remember having to unscrew them and clean them out constantly. So I don't know, maybe that's a dumb suggestion, but yeah.
No, I mean, I've got a very basic, you can buy as part of some of those systems like inline filters for some of the pipes.
Yeah,
I've got a few of those. So we'll see how those work. It's not I've only got it though to just the general spraying area, not for everything coming out of my tank, because my tank has got there's just water taps coming off it and various other things for, hoses and whatnot.
Sure.
So it'd probably be a better idea to filter it directly out of the tank, then into everything, as opposed to just for certain areas. Yeah. So that's probably something to look into.
You can get quite large 3-step filtration kits. They're only a couple $100, and you probably only need to change the filters once a year. But anyway, something to think about on your waterworks over there.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty keen to, for the summer to come through and start needing to use it and see how things go, because it worked pretty well. Like, I've gotten lots of different veggies and stuff out of my veggie garden, and that's all gone well, but it's just the hassle of having to remember, I'll figure out when you need to do it and those things.
I'll have to get Miranda to film you. You'll be like an evil genius waiting for the water to come out of your drip lines. You just I could just see it now. Tim's prancing around the backyard looking at all the different bloody fittings he's gotten, whether they're working or not.
Yeah, I'll try to figure it out, make sure it's all up to scratch. But I'll probably spend more time assessing the system to make sure it works than I would have spent just doing it myself.
Tim's like, look how much time I'm saving. And Miranda's like, Tim, you've been out here for an hour and a half watching the water drip.
Yeah, so something like that will probably happen. But yeah, it's all part of the fun. So definitely. We'll see how it all goes. But yeah, so that's that. Cool. That's this week's episode. We're back. We're doing podcasts again, which is nice. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed these podcasts, obviously we've got our audio feeds, YouTube feed. If you want to leave the feedback for us, that's usually in the comments on our YouTube video on the Hardbrung Box podcast channel. So check it out there. And yeah, we'll be back. Hopefully these episodes will be getting more interesting throughout the second half of the year, because there will be more products to talk about, more things to chat about. So yeah, good time to be subscribed. But until next week, that's it for this one. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again in the next one.
See ya.